Hey YouTube, welcome back to the BladesIIB shop and a shop maintenance video as we're going to go through and pull the motor off of this Grizzly 5963 6x12 surface grinder. You can see I already have a motor off right here, but in the video I will show removing this motor and we're going to go ahead and put a new one in place. I just want to point out though before we kick off the video, this is a brand new surface grinder and the issue with the motor is due to me wiring it from 115 volt over to 230 volt, and there was a bit of a discrepancy in the instructions in the book versus the wiring diagram. I kind of got sucked into the instructions more than the wiring diagram, so that's where an error was made. So there's no issue with the motors on this. I don't have any issue with the surface grinder or Grizzly equipment, but I did manage to go through not one but two of these motors before I figured out the mistake that I was making on there. So there's a whole nother video. I'll put a link to that up here. You can definitely go through and watch where I went wrong with the instructions and the wiring diagram on that. In this video, all you're going to see is the correct way to wire this up. But I just want to point it out up front that you may end up seeing a couple of different looking motor housings between, this one has a big black wire box on it. The original one on here had a green one. I'm waiting on the third motor to get here to actually bolt it back in place. I don't know exactly what it's going to have. So I've been recording these videos over the course of about 6 weeks while I've been waiting for motors to come in and parts to come in. So if it looks like you're seeing a different motor, I just want to make sure you understand what's going on with that. And again, you can check out the whole wiring story in another video. This one, we're going to focus on getting a motor off of here and getting the new one in place. If you're new to the channel, I sure appreciate you finding it and having a watch on these videos. If you like what you see, hit the like button, drop a comment in there, and I would really encourage you to check out some other videos on the channel. And if you like the videos on the channel, would love it if you'd hit that subscribe button and support our BladesIIB YouTube channel. It's a little bit tight back in here in the corner, so I'll do my best to get some good video angles of getting it all removed and bolted in place and all the wiring done. So again, it's a little bit tight, but I think we should be able to get some good shots in there and make that happen. With that said, let's go ahead and turn this camera around and get into getting this motor off of here, getting the new one in place, and get this machine up and running again. Let's go. All right, so before we come around the backside and take care of the electrical and actually unbolt this off here, we need to get the guard and the wheel off and make sure that that is all clear. 3 socket head screws on the front and a little set screw underneath after we get the wheel off. So let's go ahead and get this disassembled. Alright, so in order to hold the spindle and keep that from spinning while I take this nut off, I do need to take the little cover off the back of the motor. So I'll pop that off real quick. Just 3 Phillips head screws that go around that motor guard there at the back. And there we go, we got that motor cover off. I can get a wrench onto the back of that spindle. Hold that while we get this off. And it is a left-hand thread on this, so you need to make sure you're going the right way when you pull this spindle nut off. And that wheel's on a taper, so I'm just going to tap that with a brass hammer real quick just to loosen that off to get that wheel off of there. Doesn't usually take much, just one solid smack, and you should be good. Alright, and that's how it comes off. It's mounted in there. And you've got your weights on the back side where you can balance your wheel before you stick it back on. I have a wheel balancer coming where I will go ahead and balance this wheel, and then I'll dress it and then I'll balance it again after it's dressed. I had a plan to just go with the factory, having balanced it well enough to get me started, but unfortunately if you watch my unboxing and assembly video, this came loose in the first run up as well, so this came loose on here. So the wheel spun on this and it is not going to be balanced. So balanced it as best I could for right now. We'll be able to test it today on the new motor, but I will definitely balance this better in the future. All right, let's keep going. Next we got to get this whole cover piece off. And this just has one set screw down on the bottom. That was pretty basic. Alright, that should be everything here from the front end. Let me get this camera turned around and we'll get the electrical off and we'll get this whole motor pulled off of the machine. Alright, so here we are on the back side. So I have checked, and there really isn't a good place to make sure this motor is completely level on here. At the end of the day, I don't think it's really going to matter. After the motor's mounted, then you're going to dress the wheel against the table, so you're going to make sure that everything is completely square. Right now I do have the table leveled. I have that completely square, and even with this cheap little level, you can see that I'm off by a little bit there. So I think we'll just go ahead and use this, get it as level as we can. There just isn't any place on here. I was thinking I could run a dial indicator, move the table back and forth. I mean, I've got this very short little section right there. I could run a dial, but there really isn't any other flat surface on here. So we're just going to go off the casting. We'll get it as level as we can when we bolt it in place, and I think that's going to be good enough. So right now, let's get the cover off here. There should be just 2 wires under there that we need to disconnect for our electrical, and then we'll be able to get this off. All right, well, we can see some pretty good smoke and black in here. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, this is actually the first of 2 motors that I smoked on this project, and there's a whole nother video out there on where I went wrong with the instructions and the picture and how I managed to wire these wrong to smoke both of them. The motors themselves seem to be of good quality. So we're just going to disconnect, it's actually 3 wires here. So we've got K1, K2, and then we've got our ground going over here. So those are the 3 wires that we need to disconnect, and then the motor should be completely free after that to take off. You'll notice the configuration on this. It is, I did wire it for 220 volt. So this is the configuration for 220. That's what I'm plugging it into here. So if you have one of these and you notice the jumpers are different, again, just look inside your cover and you can make sure you're reading the jumpers for 115 or for 220, 230 volt for your application. All right, let's get this unwired. All right, now we've just got 2 bolts here on the top. Can't get a socket on those, so we'll use a wrench on these top 2 bolts. Same 2 bolts down underneath. I'm able to get a socket on those. 16 millimeter all the way around. I don't have a 16 millimeter wrench. 5/8 is pretty much the same. So we'll go ahead and use a 5/8 wrench on the top and 16 millimeter socket on the bottom and get that unbolted. All right, I had a piece of cardboard down here to protect my bed, but just to make sure, added a couple more pieces of foam just in case something drops, slips, comes off of there. I want to make sure we don't create a new problem while trying to solve this one. So let's make sure we've got some protection for that grinding table down there. All right, we'll just get those top ones loose. We'll get the bottom ones out and take the top ones out last. So you got about maybe 1.5 inches or so bolts holding that in. There we go, just a little bit of tension on that from the paint and everything. So, all right, I'm going to screw that one back in. This bolt over here, just snug. It doesn't want to come out finger loose. So we'll get this one all the way out, and then we can just do it by fingers with the other one. And there it is. There's the whole unit come out of there. And it actually does look like it's going to have some centering piece on the back. It's got a Boss machine back there that's going to fit. So that'll help us line it up. And then again, I'm just going to use the top of that casting to level it. And I think it'll be on there as good as it was for the other one coming off. Able to get those bolts out of there. Barely though. I think I see why this bolt got a little bit damaged. Looks like maybe when somebody had to try to pound it in there. So let me go see if I can get that out, or may just have to put a file on that casting a little bit to get our bolt out of here. Let's go see what we need to do for that. Well, while we're in here, we'll make sure we clean this up. All right, that feels good. Let's go check out this other motor and get it ready to go. All right, well, YouTube, motor number 3 has finally arrived. So let's go ahead and finish up this video on how to swap out a motor on this surface grinder, get it properly wired up, and let's get this thing finally into operation. So again, all three of these motors have been slightly different. This first one, this is the original, didn't have a motor plate on it. Came with the green electrical box on the top. The second motor that came in had a motor plate on it and came with this black electrical box on the top. So let's take a look at what we've got here with what is hopefully our third and final motor in the box. So this one came packaged up pretty well. Actually came with a crate piece on top. So we've got a piece of plywood here. Got some foam in the box. So it's strapped down. Looks like the top piece here got moved around a little bit, so we'll kind of have to bend the little bracket back in place and get the cap popped back on for that. And it looks like we're back to the little green motor box on top instead of the metal box on top. So that's what we have here. Let's get these bands cut and let's get this out of here. Alright, rest of it looks to have made the trip fine. Easy enough to get that front bolt back in the hole, so that's no problem. And of course, once we get this cap off, we'll see how this motor is wired up underneath, but I think we now have the plans to get it wired correctly, and we'll just have to tweak this bracket a little bit to get that cap lined up back on there again. So let's get it out of the box over towards our machine. Let's get this thing installed. Now we're going to go ahead and get this motor back in place. I've got this all nice and stoned and cleaned off, everything cleaned out here, no dust or debris. I've got my bolts ready to go. One of them is already in the housing, so depending on the housing you have, sometimes the top bolts are already put in the housing to get around the electrical box. On mine, one of them is in place, the other one's pretty easy to get in and out around the electrical box. And I find the easiest way to get this up in place is I've got some foam stacked up on here, and I'm just going to stack the motor up on my arm, set it up in place, and I can get a little bit of height adjustment, move it around, get it in place, hold it there, and get the bolts in. So let's go ahead and get that bolted up. Now, even with this housing, you can't push it quite all the way in place. You need to get these bolts started while it's hanging out there a little bit. Even there, I got one stuck and jammed a little. So this is where resting it on your arm really helps to kind of hold it part way out there and get these bolts started. There we go. Just for the top ones, because if you try and push it right into its recess, then they come out and they catch on this electrical housing. So you've got to sort of hold the motor out there off of its centering boss just to get these started. Now we'll just get our bottom one started in the holes, and then we'll check it for level after that. Alright, we have all of those in place. Now, just going to level this. And if you remember, that's actually more level than it was when it came off. It's held on that boss, it's nice and secure. This is really, it's going to be dressed to go square with the table, just to make sure that motor's running fairly level, keep all the bearings in good shape. And we'll come back and tighten those after we get the bottom done. And that's it. We've got our motor back in place on there. Let's go ahead and get that wired up, and then we'll come put the front of this back on afterwards. Alright, so there's what's under the cover. Now this one had a little bit of a different end on it than, this one just didn't have the metal fitting on there, so I've got that from before. We're going to be able to reuse our other ending of the other piece, so that's good. That's going to go right onto our box. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, you saw the three motors. Clearly, I've had some issues with wiring these up in the past, so we're going to go ahead and make sure we get this one wired correctly on this video. So we're in 115 mode. We've got a jumper over here. We've got a jumper across the bottom, jumper across the top, and we've got our capacitor wires going across here. So this one came wired from the factory correctly. We're going to put our K1 and our K2 wires are going to go across the two ends here. You can see where the wires go for the switching. So we're going to put those in place, but we're also going to move and set up our jumper. So we're going to remove this jumper and this one, and we're going to put a jumper across here to get this wired for 230. So let's go ahead and get that done, and then I'll talk about where I'm going to put K1 and K2 before I screw those in place.
This part really is straightforward. Just remove two jumpers, put one across the middle, and that gets your jumpers in place for 230 volt.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and make sure we get this wired up with K2 over here on Z1 and K1 on U1, which is going to be Z1 back here. So K2 is going to go back over here, and K1 is going to go over on this end. That will get us what we need to, and we'll be wired for 230 volts. Let's get them plugged in. Be just about ready to turn this on.
Here's the magic step right here. If I had just got these K1 and K2 wires in the right place the first time and saw that they had the capacitor wires on in a different place across those jumpers, that would have saved me 2 motors up to this point. But hey, live and learn. We're going to get it right this time around.
All right, that should be it. We've got K2 in place, K1 in place. I've got the ground wire around here on the back. There's a little rubber gasket. I made sure it was underneath that, has good contact with the housing. We've got our jumper in place for 230 volt.
Our capacitor wires
going across the right direction. It's my 3rd time doing this. Feeling pretty good that I have got this wired up right this time around. Let's go ahead and get our cover back in place. All right, for this cover, not much to it. Slides in place. We just have one set screw down here to hold it on. And no real way to level this. I'm just going to go across the bottom of this housing and just orient it close enough here. Our wheel is all nice and balanced. Left-hand thread, don't forget that part. And I'm going to pull the cover off the back side of the motor so that we can tighten that on the shaft. All right, we got that off there. I think I want to go ahead and vacuum. I've got some more styrofoam and other packing material in here, a little bit on the back of the motor, so we'll clean that up and then we'll get that tightened in place. And that's it. Again, left-hand thread, we've got that snugged up. Get the cover back on the back of that motor again. We'll get our wheel guard the rest of the way in place. And we're going to be ready to plug this in and start it up. Well, there it is. Our motor swap is complete. We've got our new one in place. It's wired, tightened up, wheel guard is on. Now, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little nervous about plugging this in and checking my wiring out this time around, but 3rd time's a charm. Let's go ahead and plug this in and see how it goes. We've got power contact lights over there. So we've got it plugged in. Got white light came on, so that looks good. All right, it's time for contact. Let's see how we did. So far so good. Started, it ran. I am not feeling any heat of any kind. I think last time it was getting a little hot. I hadn't noticed that. All right, startup number 2 is where I've had my problems. Alright, I'm not getting any heat whatsoever. If anything, I can feel a little bit of heat from the bearings up here at the front. And I can just feel that the housing's got some temperature. The rest of it feels great. That's 2 times starting up. Well, YouTube, that's a wrap on another video here in the BladesIIB shop, as we did a motor swap on this Grizzly 5963 6x12 surface grinder. So hopefully you never go through burning out a motor, especially not burning it out like I did when it's only 90 seconds old and brand new just because you wired it wrong. But if something does ever happen, you need to get the motor off of here, maybe change the bearings, do anything to it, do some maintenance. Now you can see how that's done. Pretty easy change. If you like the video, hey, drop a like on here, drop a comment on here. If you're new to the channel, really encourage you to check out some of the other videos on here. And if you like the videos, would love it if you'd hit that subscribe button and support our BladesIIB channel as we continue to grow here in 2022. Until next time, I hope you're out in your own shop working on some projects of your own, making some chips of your own. I'll be here in the BladesIIB shop working on something and working on that next video to get out for you. Till then, y'all take care.